opening tonight, I'm going to read another part of Psalm 119. Remember, this is the psalm about kind of that talks just about the word of the Lord and God's law and God's statutes and all these things and meditating on them and treasuring them and all that stuff, which is kind of what we're trying to do here together. It's kind of the end goal of what we're doing. So let me read a few verses and then we'll pray. And just kind of, we're all going to take a deep breath. I don't know what y'all's days or weeks have been like so far, so we're just going to take a deep breath. Okay, let me read some of these verses from Psalm 119. It says, I laid low in the dust, preserve my life according to your word. I gave an account of my ways, and you answered me. Teach me your decrees. Cause me to understand the way of your precepts, that I may meditate on your wonderful deeds. My soul is weary with sorrow. Strengthen me according to your word. Keep me from deceitful ways and be gracious to me and teach me your law. I have chosen the way of faithfulness. I have set my heart on your laws. I hold fast to your statutes, O Lord. Do not let me be put to shame. I run in the path of your commands, for you have broadened my understanding. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for time to gather together yet again. We're grateful for the opportunities you give us. Would you help us be faithful and be diligent? Sometimes, God, this material feels just like hard to get through. It feels like just walking through a massive pit of quicksand. So would you give us endurance and understanding? Holy Spirit, would you illuminate the scriptures to us? It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Okay, quick few things, housekeeping. So the weekly readings and assignments, great. I think I got 95% of them in. There might be a few of you who I haven't heard from yet. Those beginning next week, so beginning technically now, when we begin week 3, beginning now, those are all going to be submitted through Google Classroom. You should have gotten an email from me a few days ago, maybe yesterday. The days run together. Please raise your hand if you did not get an email from me about Google Classroom. Wonderful. Okay, I need you all to do that. If you haven't set up your profile yet, click on that link. It's pretty easy. If you have questions about that, email me and I can try to help you. Or maybe one of our lovely people here who's gifted in those ways would also be willing to help. But yeah, Google Classroom is where you will be submitting the reading kind of reflection question, the summary question from now on, which means that you do have to type it. I know some of you have been scanning it. You have to type it now. It's very helpful to me. It's going to help me kind of synthesize a few things. Please, again, there's no grades. It's just do it there. I have it set to where no one's going to be able to see your answer, or so I expect right now. If something's wrong, I will change it. We'll figure it out as we go. We're all going to kind of learn together a little bit. So we're just going to kind of see how it goes. But I've created, I think it's called an assignment or a work thing. You can click on it, and that's where you will type your response and then hit send, and it will come to me. Okay? I will also be posting in Google Classroom all of the slides, the reading questions for the week, so you won't be getting emails from me with attachments. They'll all be posted in Google Classroom. So you don't have to keep track of emails anymore. You don't have to keep track of where did I download that attachment? Did I save that email in this file? It's all there. So you just go to Google Classroom, the slides there, you can download the slides, you can get access to the reading questions. If there's an article or something I want to send out to y'all, I'll do it through there as well. So Google Classroom is where it's happening, okay? And like I said, we're going to figure it out together. I'm sure we're going to have some bumps in the road, but we're just going to figure it out together, and it's going to be great. Okay, quick thing, quote office hours. Again, pretend like we're in grad school for just a second. I'm here on Tuesdays starting around like 5 or 5:15. So if you ever have a question that you want to sit down and talk about, if you're ever like, I do not understand this chapter, can you please help me? I would love to do that. So email me, even if you email me Tuesday morning and say, hey, can we meet for 15 minutes before? Can I get there at 6 instead? Yes, the answer to that is yes. I would love to sit down with you and help you. If you need to do that not on a Tuesday night, that's great. Shoot me an email. I'm happy. I love getting coffee. So, yeah, that's great. I'm available. But I'm also available here on Tuesday evenings before we meet. Food, the most important thing. We are working on a schedule to get some snacks and some regularity over there for y'all so we're not hungry. You may be getting an email. Some of you may have already received an email if you reached out to me about food stuff, maybe. Janelle Kelleher is our admin for adult discipleship, and she may have reached out to a few of you. If not, she will be, especially if you reached out to me already. I gave her y'all's names. So be on the lookout for an email, and we will get a schedule figured out for that. It's just not something that I have the bandwidth right now to really focus on the sandwiches. So anyways, sandwiches are important. I just can't quite manage all of it with other things. So anyways, okay, all that fun stuff out of the way. Any quick questions, housekeeping things that I can answer for us? Great. Okay, here we go. Week 3. I know, based on some of the reading reflections that you all sent me, some of you really, really enjoyed this past chapter. Some of you were like, this was like walking through like hardened concrete with like 16 layers of clothes on, and I was dying. And that's, it's tricky. It's new for some of us. There's still some new vocabulary, right? There's still some new concepts. That's okay. That's why we're here. That's why we're here. Some of you may have been able to get through this a little bit easier than the last week. I don't know. Just know that if you're one of the people writing me or in your reflections going, this is hard, it's not really like making me like have warm fuzzy feelings yet, like it's not like a spiritual experience yet, that's okay, you're not alone. I got about 17 other comments just like that, okay? So you're not alone. You're not alone, okay? So hang in there. I promise you that we are building a foundation that's going to be very, very helpful to us. Okay, some things to kind of think about, quotes to think about as we jump into this week. One of them is this. It's from N.T. Wright. He says, people often get upset when you teach them, man, guys, I'm struggling with typing. When you teach them what is in the Bible rather than what they presume is in the Bible. This is a true fact, believe me. Believe me. People often get upset when you teach them what is in the Bible rather than what they presume is in the Bible. Especially if what they presume is in the Bible has been their long-held belief since they were 7 years old. So what we have to realize, again, remember, the very first week I said that, hey, the first rule of theology, the first rule of exegesis, do no harm. Remember that what we're doing is delicate work sometimes. It's deep work. It's long-term work sometimes. It takes us a while to get where we're going. But just be aware that if you start having conversations with people, and even stuff that I say, you might go, whoa, 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 whoa. This is why. It's because people get upset when you teach them what's actually in the Bible rather than what they only presume has been in the Bible their whole lives. So anyways, okay. This was in y'all's book. It's a really good reminder. A text without a context is a pretext. A text without a context is a pretext. I think I said at the very beginning, the first week, the Bible has been used to justify horrible things. So if we aren't careful readers of the Bible, we can walk away with whatever. If you want to find it in here, you can find it in here. If you want to justify your behavior somehow by your study of this, you can do it. Which is why we have so many different people who read the Bible and come away with different responses and different answers and different perspectives and different denominations and different beliefs. So we have to be careful to realize that if we come to the Bible and we don't observe context, we are tempted and we are likely to walk away with whatever presuppositions we want to find. So good reminders. Okay, this is a question, just think about this. Think about this with me for a second. Yes, ma'am. Yes, I will send out the slides in Google Classroom. Do we have another hand? No? Okay. Gotcha. Okay, question. Something to think about. Can a Bible verse or passage mean something today that it did not mean when it was originally written? Okay. No, I mean, can it mean, like, application is a different thing, but can we read a Bible passage today and say this means this because it means this for me, if that's not what it originally meant? Okay. Right. I could be wrong. Right here. This is a good thing to keep in the backs of our minds. Because sometimes we want to walk away with a meaning from a text that is not what it originally meant. Now, applications can change. How I apply a text in my life today can look a lot different than how I apply a text in my life 5 years from now, because I'm growing, I'm learning, the text is becoming more alive to me. But it's a good exegetical question to ask ourselves. Can a text mean something today that it did not originally mean? Yes? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Not exactly, but I will say that's a very common thing that we hear, that the Bible is antiquated. It's old. It doesn't apply to us today. We've moved past its use. It's thousands of years old. How on earth could it have something to say to us today? So that is something that people, by all means, talk about and discuss and have heated debates over. Hold on, Catherine. Let me get.
So I guess, what's the yardstick you use for what originally meant?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Catherine. Okay, Jeremiah 29:11. No. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, all this stuff. This is not a verse that we should just have in our homes and be like, oh, that gives me warm, fuzzy feelings. Why? Because there's a bigger context around that verse that is not pleasant. There's a bigger context around that verse that God's saying, hey, you're going to go through a lot of really bad stuff. It's not a warm, happy verse. Another one is Joshua, in the beginning of Joshua, when he looks at people and says, hey, choose this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Stuff like that. So typically this gets applied and gets pulled out with verses that we love to just throw out. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Stuff like that. So just things to think about. Yes? Mm-hmm. I think it can be, this is just a question, I don't have an answer to this question. This is just something I'm throwing out for us to consider as we approach the Bible. See bullet point 1. Yes. Not tech, though, teach. Okay, just something to think about. Okay, last big quote. Here we go. This is something that I read. This is a quote. Hold on, don't read the quote yet. Just focus here. This is a quote that I read, and I think it came to me through multiple different kind of layers of people. So I think the context of this, and I could be wrong, I think the context of this is someone who grew up in the faith, grew up in church, and has since left for a myriad of reasons. One of their reasons primarily being how Christians handle the Bible. Okay? This is what, again, I could be wrong on that context, but I do know people who have the sentiment who fit that context as well. So, says this: when people say the Bible clearly says, what they are actually saying is, I believe that my mind can instantly understand the work of an eternal, all-powerful, all-knowing God simply by reading a passage in English. The fact that I live thousands of years after the culture that wrote it, thousands of miles away, multiple languages, cultures, and worldviews removed from the original authors and hearers doesn't matter. My brain is so almighty that I can understand the creation of the universe instantly by accepting every English word I read in a woodenly literal fashion. And rather than being open-minded to new ideas or changing my views as my knowledge and understanding grow, I will spend the rest of my life defending my current understanding. Have you all ever heard a creation and evolution debate? This is the kind of thinking that people who walk away from the faith because of how Christians have handled the Bible and how they won't answer questions about the Bible think. They think this way. To say the phrase, the Bible clearly says, is a dangerous phrase. Because I don't even say, I walked away from saying that phrase a long time ago. Because I'm going to say that phrase, and then someone you're going to meet tomorrow is going to say that exact same phrase and say something that's completely different than what I just said. So what we can do is we can offer information, we can act more as guides and say, this seems to be a viable option of how to interpret this text because of these reasons, because of this research that I've done, because of the help that I've gotten from commentators and dictionaries and that type of stuff. But we have to realize that if we are to say, this text clearly says this and means this, just FYI, just be careful. I'm just throwing information out. Like I don't have answers to this. I don't have deep thoughts about this right now. This is just like, be aware that this exists in the world. Be aware that there are people who think about the Bible this way, who are in your church right now, who are maybe like in this room right now, who are just wondering and struggling and saying, the Bible's weird. And when you say that it clearly means this, how can you know that that's what it clearly means? Because there's 17 other people right here that disagree with that. So these are just things to think about, things to consider. Okay, this week we talked about contextual analysis. I know, again, that this was maybe dry for some of us. Some of you really liked it. Some of you who are more kind of like research-brained or wanting to dig for information-brained, some of you, like, you lit up on the inside with this. Some of you wanted to take a nap, and that's okay. That's okay. But let me do a quick run-through of this, and then I'm going to jump ahead and have us look into what we're doing next week for the reading assignments, because next week, yours truly will not be lecturing, and all God's people said amen. I'm going to have a very, very dear friend of mine. He is a professor at Denver Seminary. He's now one of their endowed professors there. He's widely respected. He's written multiple books. He's going to join us via Zoom, and he's going to give us a presentation on how did we get the Bible. So he's going to walk us through, like, how did we end up with this text, and why does that matter? It's going to be great. He's a great presenter. He's a great teacher. So that being said, we won't have, like, exactly a normal time together next week, so I'm going to jumpstart your reading for next week so you're not, like, in the dark. Okay, just quick run through what we learned this week. Just, again, I try to, like, synthesize it down just into one slide so that we're all on the same page. We hear it again, we see it again. Historical, sociopolitical, cultural, and context. And again, remember, when you sit down to write a book, you have to start somewhere, right? You have to start, something has to be chapter 1. Now, Gorman realizes, and I hinted at it at the very beginning, biblical exegesis is more of a circular thing. It kind of folds back in on itself. It's not necessarily linear sometimes. You're always going to start with your observation, your survey. But once you get past that point, sometimes you're going to dip your toe into historical information first. Sometimes, which is what we're going to learn about next week, you're going to dip your toe into, like, the literary form first. Like, what genre of writing is this? It's kind of like a big pool that you just kind of figure out where you're going to float in first sometimes. So Gorman, when he wrote the book, he had to start somewhere, so he decided to start with contextual analysis. We're going to learn about formal analysis next week, and all of it will begin to kind of come together. But this is historical context. So, world of text, author and original audience. Did you guys pick up on the fact that you have two different kind of historical contexts at play when you read a text? You have the historical context of the author and the original audience. But think about this. Let's assume for a second, and FYI, there are scholars aplenty who do not believe this. Let's assume that Moses wrote most of the first 5 books of the Bible. Okay, let's just assume it. I'm not sure if I buy it right now, but whatever. Let's just assume for a second that Moses did. Moses was not there when God said, "Let there be light." Okay? He's not like, okay. He is hundreds and thousands of years after that. So you have Moses, again, assuming this, you have Moses writing Genesis. Stuff that happened way before he ever was in the picture, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So you have the author's context, you have Moses' context of what happens in his life, his experience with God, his experience with the children of Israel, all of his life experiences. And then you have the immediate people to which he is writing this down. So you have the author's context, Moses' context, and the immediate audience's context. And then if you want to go back in time, you have the context of the people in the time that Moses is writing about hundreds and thousands of years prior. So there's kind of two different historical contexts that you have to take into consideration. We good? And that's a different, some of us haven't made that connection before, and that's okay. But some of us haven't made the connection that, there's which again, I think I mentioned a few weeks ago, which is why you can read 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles and get, like, they're telling the same stories, primarily. Like, they're telling a lot of the same stories, but they are very differently told. because they're written at different times, to different audiences, for different purposes. This is why the Gospels look different. The Gospels, the writers of the Gospels weren't, we read the beginning of Luke last week. Luke didn't follow everyone around writing stuff down. He sat down decades later and was like, I've been doing some research. I'm going to make an account of this. And he's pulling different sources. He's pulling different people's information. This is why the Gospels look different. They're written at different points in time, to different audiences, and they are written for different purposes. Okay, so that's historical context. You have kind of two different ones you got to play around with and kind of do some research on. You have narrative context, the world of the characters in the text. So this kind of goes back to the world of the people who are being written about. So what's happening when Moses is writing about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob? What's actually happening in the time why is this narration of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob the way it is? What's happening in their lives? What's going on around them historically? What other cultures are popping up? Those types of things. Yes? That's a great question, and I could get in a lot of trouble for how I answer that. Yes, that's why you have to. We're going to talk about different tools we can use tonight. We're going to look at different Bible dictionaries, commentaries, that kind of stuff. This is where we have to lean on people who this is what they do. So what's the world of Abraham? Like what does day-to-day life look like in Abraham's time for a semi-wealthy nomadic person? Oh, absolutely. You're going to get little bits and pieces of information from the text, but you're going to have to grab the commentaries and the dictionaries and the maps and the theological dictionary. That's where we start grabbing those things to get information. Correct. So those would be the same? Yes. And then the narrative context would be different. Narrative is like what's happening in the actual story. Who are the people in the story? What's going on in their world, their time, that kind of stuff. No, you're great. This is great. I know. It's sometimes you got to sit down and reread it multiple times, and even then it's like, woo. Okay. Literary and rhetorical contexts. We're just building a foundation here. How does the text I'm reading fit into a larger unit? Again, we want to be careful that we're not just kind of like drop-down readers where we're like, I'm going to read these 4 verses and not get any bigger picture of the chapter I'm in or the book I'm in or the section of scripture I'm in, the type of literature I'm in, which we're going to talk about more this coming week as well. We need to be sure that we're not just dropping down and being like, I need to be encouraged today, so I'm just going to find my favorite 4 verses and read those. And again, we should read the Bible contemplatively. You should do that. But for exegetical purposes, we need to get a bigger literary context, bigger vision. Again, what material is around the passage? What seems to be the text's function? You can kind of make an assumption at the beginning of your investigation. What seems to be the purpose of this text? Is it to give me information, to tell me a story, to give me a command, to encourage, to instruct? What's the feel here? That can also kind of determine a little bit of how you're going to go about some of your further research. And then, of course, the one that we're most comfortable with, canonical context. How does the text relate to other texts in the Old Testament or New Testament? This is where a lot of us, for the most part, have camped out our whole lives. How does this relate to the Bible? What is the Bible story being woven here? How does this fit into big picture things? How does this fit into what I read about in the Old Testament too? Where does this fit into the big story of what God is doing? This is kind of where most of us have been more comfortable our whole lives. And then, are there any major biblical themes? Am I picking up on those? And here's the thing. Some of you might be going, I don't even know if I would know a major biblical theme if it hit me in the head. Some of us might be, okay, God saving us. That's a theme that we see. Yes, God, okay, so that's a good one. Stuff like that. But some of us, here's the deal. Some of us don't even know those, and that's okay. Because as you read the Bible more and more and more, you will begin to notice them. You will begin to pick up and be like, this seems to be a really familiar story or a really familiar kind of climax to the story, and the characters seem to be kind of doing similar things, or I've read about this type of thing somewhere else. And you'll begin to weave those together as you read more and more and more. We're not going to step in and immediately be experts, and that frustrates all of us, right? We don't like the learning no one does. We don't like the learning process. But, just know that the more time you spend in the text, the more comfortable you will become with the text, which is a great thing. Yes? Yes. So you're right. Some of this does kind of bleed into the other. So here you're dealing with, more just the Bible itself, but it does bleed into literary context because you need to understand what kind of literature is this? Where is this situated within the Bible? So they do overlap a little bit. It's a good point. Good point. Yes. It is, yeah, because it's a little bit, it's not as dry as you would get real bored if all you ever heard in a sermon was historical context. Like we would all get that's why all of you in your responses, you're like, this is kind of dry. So yeah, hopefully most sermons have been written after heavy research into the historical, socio-political, cultural context has been done, and that's the foundation, and you kind of get little bits of that in a sermon. But most preachers are going to focus on canonical context and kind of theological aspects rather than telling you, most people aren't going to pull up a map in their sermon and that be the whole thing is 30 minutes of them explaining something to you on a map. They might reference it as part of the historical or the geographical context, but most pastors, most preachers on a Sunday are going to camp out in canonical context and theological exegesis because it's more applicable to our lives. So a good example of kind of the canonical context, and this is something that I try to draw out often, the Exodus narrative, the motifs, the types, the things we see in the Exodus narrative get played out over and over and over again in the Bible. So for example, the book of Exodus starts with we read a little bit last week, Pharaoh oppresses God's people, Moses is born, he gets put on the water in a basket, he's in Egypt, he gets, he wanders around in the wilderness as a shepherd for 40 years-ish, and then goes back, leads God's people out of bondage. We see these types of motifs over and over again. We see it with Jesus' life. Jesus, if you read Matthew carefully, Matthew paints Jesus as a new Moses. In the way he describes him, in the way he orders the story, he describes and explains how Jesus is like a new Moses. And so if you begin to kind of draw connections like that, the world just opens up as you read the Bible. It's phenomenal. You get to Revelation, there's a whole lot of Exodus motifs in Revelation. Why? Because the story of Exodus ultimately is about God saving and redeeming his people from evil, oppressive systems. Which is why Jesus' death and resurrection are framed in the Passover narrative. So again, what are the motifs? What are kind of the big picture things? How am I drawing stuff? That's kind of where we fit into the literary and canonical context. Again, to Tom's point, how they weave together. And again, we begin to see more of these as we read more of the Bible and as we kind of look at resources and stuff like that. To that point, we're going to talk about some resources right now. I know that someone a few weeks ago asked, they're like, well, can we Google it? And I said, no, please don't. Please don't Google it. We need to, if we're going to be good expositors of Scripture, if we're going to be, faithful readers and kind of doing this work, I would encourage you, this is what I do. You don't have to do this, but I would encourage you to do it. In my monthly budget, little peek into Laurien's personal life, in my monthly budget, I have a line item for books. For books. Now, it's subdivided into fun books and then academic books, which is why my library gets bigger and bigger every minute, much to the detriment of anyone who ever helps me move. But I would encourage you to explore beginning to build a small theological library. Now, Institute is going to help you do that. You have this book, and you're getting more books as we do the other classes. So that's part of the goal here, is to give you tools and resources. But to that end, I know some of you have asked, so I'm going to kind of walk through some of these. This is just practical help. I'm going to put all these up here real quick. There you go. Okay. I brought a bunch of resources. And so I'm going to just show you real quickly, and you can go back and rewatch the video if you need to figure them out again. Okay, so Bible dictionaries are great. Now here's the thing. As there is with anything you're going to do in life, there are brands and publishing companies and stuff that are really good and consistently putting out good stuff. And there's some that you need to kind of maybe take with a grain of salt. Okay, so ones like Oxford University Press, Tyndale House, Baker, Zondervan, IVP. These are good, solid publishers who are doing good, solid work with theologians and biblical scholars. Now, I realize that not all of you have just an overflowing budget to go buy books, and some of you don't even want to, and that's fine. But if you want to have just a few key pieces, they're going to help you kind of get your feet wet. So Compact Dictionary of Theological Terms. It's from Baker. Dictionary of Theological Terms. So for example, I'm just going to flip to a page here. I'm going to try to find one that's not going to be overly controversial. Yeah, exegesis. Here we go. Yeah. Yeah, go back and rewatch the video. I'm not going to read the names of all these every time. Don't feel like you need to write them down right now. Okay, so the 5 ways. Does anyone know what that is? This is Aquinas' 5 ways of knowing that God exists. First mover, all that stuff. Okay. He talks about, he gives you the word and then a paragraph about what it means. So this is theological terms. This is stuff like, even like the Council of Constantinople. It's in here. Things like the Mosaic Covenant. If you're reading about Moses, go pick up a Bible dictionary and see. This is a great one to have because it's compact and it's small and it's cheap. There are ones that are multi-volume sets that are not as compact and cheap. But, for example, there's that. Now, there's another one, the Baker Compact Bible Dictionary. So this was theological terms. This is Bible Dictionary. So this has things like, let's see here, Ezra. If you want to know a little bit about Ezra, Dead Sea, deliverance, stuff like that. Centurion. What does that mean? When we read about centurions in the Bible, I need more than just a footnote. What's like a paragraph of information about that? Again, this is a compact. It says it in the name. Compact Bible Dictionary. Again, there are multi-volume sets. So Bible dictionaries, Bible handbooks, things of that nature. Incredibly helpful. Let's see here. Commentaries, also very helpful. I have a few commentaries that I lean towards and prefer more than others. One of them that's really helpful is the New International Commentary on the New Testament. They look like this. Some of you have probably seen this, okay? It's a good commentary series. They have one on just about every book of the Bible. They're still kind of putting some of those out right now. It's a good commentary for people like yourselves, most of you at least, who you don't have the Greek and Hebrew stuff. You're like, I don't need all those words. I don't know what that means. It has just enough to challenge you and explain what it is, but also give you context, also give you those types of things, okay? This is a great commentary series. That's kind of like, this is like the lowest level I would say to go, and I don't mean lowest level in a bad way. This is the Old Testament for everyone, the New Testament for everyone. So John Goldengay did the Old Testament for everyone. N.T. Wright did the New Testament for everyone. Some of you probably have some of these. This is probably as low as I would say to go, simply because this is more, now granted, John and Tom are phenomenal authors. But the purpose of this commentary series is to give you a little bit of context, a little bit of historical background, a little bit of literary background, a little bit of style background, and then some application. So it's good for devotional reading. If you're going through something with a small group, this is a great tool, a great resource. This commentary series, this is their volume on Exodus and Leviticus. And also, you can get most of these digitally, too, if you're a digital book person. I don't understand you if you are, but some of you are. This is one of my favorites, the Tyndale New Testament commentary series. They also have the Tyndale Old Testament commentary series. This gets a little bit more kind of into some details, into some of the nitty-gritty. It's a good, but it's also a really good landing place for people, again, like most of you here, who are like, I understand what they mean when they're talking about context now. I understand what he's meaning when he says, this is the structure of the passage. I understand why they're talking about these things. Great resource. So if you want to do a Bible study, if you want to do a book study, pick up a commentary or two, and they're great tools to have kind of in your tool belt. Okay, a few other things. Bible dictionaries and handbooks, things like this. For example, this is my Oxford History of Christian Worship. This is a book on nothing but how worship has progressed in the church. So, for example, if you're reading about something in the New Testament primarily, this starts kind of more apostolic fathers, but if you're reading something about worship that happens in the New Testament, and you're like, I want to know what worship was like what were their services like? Did they do baptisms and worship services? Did they do that? What does that matter? Why is that important? Great resources are these types of handbooks. Again, they can get pretty specific, and they can also get pretty pricey, which is why there's a half-price book sticker on this one. Half-price books, y'all, you can find some good textbooks there. Because all those seminary students who are dumping their books, dump them at half price. So, every time I'm at half price, I swing through their theology section carefully. Carefully. But yeah, so handbooks, dictionaries, all that kind of stuff. Great resources. And then from that point on, you can get as specific as you want. If you're reading a book in the Old Testament, like Exodus, that is primarily biblical narrative, there are books on how to read biblical narrative. So this is Robert Alter is a great biblical scholar. This is his book, The Art of Biblical Narrative. So if you want to understand more about how narrative structure, which, again, some of us are just now realizing that's a thing, and that's okay. There's tools to help us. There are tools to help us. So that's an example of a more kind of drill down tool. This is a book. I just kind of grabbed different ones to just give you a potpourri of options that are out there in the world. Some of you, if you're doing a study in the Old Testament and you're reading a lot about the Messiah, you're reading a lot about messianic language. This is a book called God's Messiah in the Old Testament. How does the Old Testament deal with the Messiah? How does it deal with texts around the Messiah? This is by Andrew Abernathy and Goswell. Andrew's a great guy, super fun to talk to, really, really great guy, knows his stuff. But yeah, so there's specific books for you as well, outside of the more general dictionaries, commentaries, handbooks, theological things. You can drill down and usually find resources that'll be really, really helpful to you. Last but not least, a New Testament example. If you are reading a specific book in the New Testament and want to get a specific kind of viewpoint on it, that is available to you because there's tons of books out there. This book I read when I'm writing a curriculum on Mark right now. And this book is called Reading Mark's Christology Under Caesar, Jesus the Messiah, and Roman Imperial Ideology. Context. Historical context. Why does Mark write Mark the way he does? Why does he focus on certain characters more than others? Why does he use that language when he talks about the temple? Why does Rome play this role in Mark? Context. Historical, literary context. And it's a whole book. So we can get as kind of 40,000 foot view as we want, or we can get really drilled down. And some of you are going, I don't want to go that far. That's okay. That's okay. I just want you to know there's tools out there. There's tools out there that are not Google. Please be careful if you ever Google something about the Bible. Please, about anything really, you should be careful. Also note, in your textbook, flip to page 200 with me real quick. Some of us haven't flipped this far, and that's okay. 200. Starts a really good just kind of reminder of what you've learned. So element 1 on page 201, survey. Element 2, contextual analysis. It's a real good summary. But if you keep going, just a few pages over to page 205, resources for exegesis. And it goes on for a hot minute. Page after page after page after page of good, solid resources and recommendations for you if you want to go deeper in a specific area, If you want to learn more about something, lots of resources there for you to pick from. He has it broken down, Old Testament exegesis, New Testament exegesis, theological interpretation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just know that that's available to you. I know a lot of you have asked me questions like, how do I know or find a good resource? How do I know or find a good commentary? Or how do I, what tool should I use? This is a great place to go. Like if you want to look more, you're like, I want some general books on New Testament historical context. I kind of want to get my arms around that better. Just flip back here, take a little look, and then head over to Amazon. That's what I do. I'm like, oh, I need a book on that. Let me see if anyone that I respect has recommended it. It's a great resource right here. So flip through that if you are interested. The back of this book is really helpful in other ways too, but that is a resource that is before you. So you're not just kind of like out in the deep end, like treading water, like I don't know where I can land. It's a great place to look to land. So yeah, tools. Yes? Why did I pick that? Yeah. I picked that because I figured not many of you had it. He asked, why did I pick the Cultural Background Study Bible? Because I figured not many of you had it. I figured there was a good chance that at least 50% of the people in this room had a study Bible somewhere in their house. Just a normal, NIV, ESV study Bible, something like that. Maybe even a more specific one. They have apologetic study Bibles. They have guys, there are too many. It's getting really embarrassing. It's eventually going to come out like the lawyer's study Bible, the iron worker's study. I'm like, this is excessive, and I have some really strong thoughts on that. But anyways, mostly because I figured, one, that not many of you had that particular Bible, and two, because it does give us so much cultural context. It approaches the commentary, it approaches the footnotes from a little bit of a different angle, more specific angle, that I was like, I think that this is going to be helpful in understanding context a little bit better, especially when it comes to historical, cultural backgrounds, those types of things. So yeah. Yes, yeah. Mostly when we get to the Old Testament and New Testament classes, we'll start using that to kind of help us get our arms around some stuff. And I'll tell you guys when to bring that. Yes? Yes. Yes. It's not like we're preparing for some big exegesis paper that we got to deliver. No. I don't have time to read y'all's papers. No. Yeah, no, the book is written for seminary students with the goal of them writing a research paper. Wherever he mentions paper in this book or like writing, just think Bible study. Just think when I'm doing Bible study, like intensive Bible, when I'm in a small group doing, if I'm preparing a lesson, this is good. But no one, you're not gonna have to write a paper, Connolly. It's fine. Take that, lay that burden down at the cross, girlfriend. You could if you wanted to. No. Okay, any more questions? I realize that this is kind of I just want you guys to know there's things out there to help you. You're not just having to read the Bible and be like, I don't know any of this. I don't know where to start. And we're going to practice this together here in just a little bit. Yes? Dallas, the flagship store. No, I don't. It's hit or miss. I have been to all of the half-price books within the greater Houston area, and again, it's hit or miss. Generally, you can find something. You can find a commentary on like a random book of the Bible. You're like, oh, today they have a commentary on Matthew. Great, I'm going to take that because this is in a commentary series that I know, that I enjoy, that I'm trying to build in my library. So I'm just going to grab that because it's there. So I don't find that there's a specific half-price books though that has them cheaper than another or more. Yeah, it's hit or miss. It's half-price books. But yeah, it's a great place to look. And also, if you are a digital person, if you're a Kindle person or whatever person, again, I don't understand you if you are, but God bless you. You can get whole commentary series cheaply. cheaply. If you're a software person, if you're an Accordance or Logos, depending on who you talk to and who actually knows Greek, those two programs are available to you, and you can get entire commentary sets, like all 66 books, cheaply. Cheaply meaning a few $100, but compared to when you order them in print, it's thousands of dollars to get all of them. And if you want to get one commentary, it's like $12. So if you are wanting to get into that, let me know. I'm happy to have a conversation with you about resources and options that are out there for you if you're a digital person. And again, I use both of those programs. They're great. But again, happy to help and answer questions if you need it. Okay, let's look ahead. Because again, like I said, next week, we're not going to have a time to kind of go over some of the stuff we've learned as much. So I want to kind of whet your appetite a little bit for what we are learning. And again, remember, what we're learning now with all the context from the historical context, the socio-political context and stuff we learned existed last week, as we go into this coming week, we're going to be looking at what's called formal analysis. So what is the form of the text? What type of literature is it? Again, remembering that as you do exegesis, as you do Bible study, they all kind of work together, and you can kind of pick where you want to start sometimes. I actually typically prefer to start with formal analysis because I like to make my outline of the passage. I like to get my bearings. I like to figure out what type of literature is this, those types of things, okay? So remember that they all kind of work together and fold in on each other. Formal analysis, the form, structure, and movement of a text. So we're going back to like English class, like sophomore high school English class. Like, how do we read Shakespeare? Why does the form of this matter? Why is this sonnet laid out this way? Is this a sonnet or is this like a narration? Like, what is this, like a soliloquy in Macbeth, or like what is this? Like, that's kind of where we're going with this. What type of writing is the passage? Is it poetry? Is it narrative? Is it, what is it a praise? Is it a psalm? What is it? These are the types of questions we're asking ourselves in this. What are the parts of the passage? So how is the passage divided? Is it like narrative, and then we get like Paul just randomly slaps a hymn of praise in there, and then we go back to narrative? That happens sometimes. What is the shape of the passage? What are the parts of this passage? How does the passage flow? What's the line of thought throughout the passage? Those types of questions. The progression of a text through all of the above parts. So how does the author, what case is the author making? Are they making a case? What's the flow of logic? What's the thought process? What do I get by reading the end of the passage that I didn't have at the beginning? Again, we're kind of going back to like sophomore English, doing these types of questions, but formal text analysis, what am I looking at? Not so much like, why was it written, or like what's the historical context of what it was written, or like why, not so much that, we've already talked about that. This is like, what's the text in front of me, and why does it look the way it looks? And why does it flow the way it flows? Does it have a denouement? Does it have a climax? Does it have like a point that is what's repeated? These types of questions, okay? One of the best ways to get our arms around what we're dealing with is to outline a passage. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. We're actually going to practice some of that. I have some handouts for y'all. Outline a passage. Okay, and you guys know, again, some of us have been out of school for a long time. So let me remind you, if you're going to do an outline, typically when we do biblical, kind of like outline the passage that you're studying, it's going to be a 2 or 3 tier outline. So you're going to have ones, A's, and then little ones. Does that make sense? Or you're just going to have like ones and A's and B's. So like either it's 2 tier or it's 3 tier. Now, outlining 101. You cannot have an A if you don't have a B. You cannot have a 1 if you don't have a 2. It's just not proper. It's not how it's done. So just FYI, because if you can't get more than that, then maybe it just needs to be a whole thing by itself. Maybe it doesn't need to be broken down. So just keep that in mind. Outlining a passage, and we're going to look at some examples of that. Generally, in the fronts of commentaries, the commentator has outlined the passage for you. Very helpful. Very helpful. Sometimes in your study Bibles, depending on the study Bible you have, it's outlined for you. It's a great way to both, in those settings, get an outline of the entire book, and then you can also just look at the passage that you're dealing with. You see if similar themes are popping up. You see, like, where is it going? It's a great thing to look at when you sit down to study a book of the Bible. Look at an outline of the passage. Look at an outline of the whole book. Structural patterns. So again, is it narrative and then they slap a poem or a praise in there and then it goes back to narrative? Or what are we dealing with and why does it matter? Why does it matter? So is there repetition, contrast, antithesis? What are the words doing here? Is something being repeated? Is something being really drawn out? Am I just noticing this over and over and over again? And why is that important? What is the author trying to show me? Parallelism. This is a great one. And this is all stuff you're going to read in the coming week. So you'll get a reinforcement. And he actually has like diagrams and pictures of some of this and examples that are really helpful. Parallelism. It's a great thing to examine in a text. Inclusio. Again, he has pictures of this, so it's okay. Inclusio. The beginning and end of the passage act as bookends. They say the same thing. They mean the same thing. Let me see if he gives an example of this in here somewhere. I should have written it down, but then I forgot. Okay, for example, Psalm 118. Psalm 118, verses 1 through 4. This is how Psalm 118 starts. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His steadfast love endures forever. The end of verse 4 says, his steadfast love endures forever. And it's repeated over and over and over and over again. If you ever had to read that passage for like the lectionary, it gets like really redundant really fast. But that's the point. That's the point. So things like that, things in that vein, just pick up on. He gives examples. So you're going to get to experience this all this coming week. One of these is a fancy word. It's called chiasmus. Chiasms, just based on the Greek word chi, so it looks like an X basically. Again, if you look on page, let's see here. Yeah, if you look on page 99, he gives a beautiful example of this from Psalm 51. The Psalms do this a lot because it's poetry, different types of literary styles. So if you look at the bottom of page 99, and this isn't just like, you know how like when you're in high school and you had to like analyze poetry and you're like, I'm pretty sure the author of this poem is just trying to tell me the sunset was beautiful. I don't think there's a deeper meaning here. I don't think there's a reason that they're just trying to tell me the sunset was beautiful and my teacher is making this really boring. Like, I hated that. I'm like, can we just appreciate the literature for what it is? The authors of the Bible were great authors. They had like depths of literary style and knowledge. So when you read Psalm 51, the first verse is a chiasm. The author is drawing you into a theme and then reminding you of that theme again. So for example, it says this, have mercy on me, O God. That's the A portion. According to your steadfast love, that's B. According to your abundant mercy, B prime, that's the fancy way of saying what that little line after the B means, like it looks like a little apostrophe. So have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love. B prime, according to your abundant mercy. So he's continuing on into the theme of love and mercy. And then A prime, blot out my transgression. He's talking about God having mercy on him. And then the psalm actually continues this way in a lot of ways. The Psalms do this a lot. You don't see this as much in narrative. In narrative, we see more of what you see on page 102 and 103. Flip over there with me. Notice on page 102 in figure 5.1, he talks about how really good authors will do this. They'll set up, they'll introduce you to the setting, they'll introduce you to the characters, and then you have like a conflict. You guys have read books, you know how this works, you've seen movies. You have a conflict, and it rises to this climax of like problem. And then eventually it kind of begins on this downward trajectory where things begin to fall into place, solutions are reached. Sometimes they're not great solutions, but solutions are reached. And then you have a denouement or a closure or resolution. Biblical authors are doing this to draw you into a story. They're brilliant authors. They're brilliant writers. They know what they're doing. So if we begin to pick up on this stylistically, what we do is we avoid just grabbing a verse. Because when you begin to see what's the bigger literary context, you won't do that as much because you're like, oh, this is the climax of a bigger narrative happening, and I need to look at the whole narrative. Do you see why this is important? It helps us not just kind of grab verses willy-nilly. Questions about that I can Again, this is what you're going to be reading this coming week. I just wanted to set it up for us.